In this week's episode, we tackle the critical risks facing martial arts school owners and why securing specialized insurance coverage can't wait another day. Welcome to Black Belt Banter, the best podcast to help your martial arts school increase in profits and generate substantial revenue. I'm Jimmy Hong, and my co-host is Master Chanley. Today, we're joined by Mrs. Beth Block, a true veteran in the world of specialized insurance. For over 30 years, Beth and her team at Block Insurance has been protecting martial arts schools, child care centers, and private and charter schools across the United States. She's built her reputation on deep industry expertise, clear communication, and a commitment to making sure business owners understand exactly how to safeguard what they've worked so hard to build. In this episode, Mrs. Beth shares her insight on the unique risks martial arts school owners face and why having specialized coverage isn't just smart, it's essential. Mrs. Block, Master Chanli, welcome to the show. It's a critical, important show. Master Lee, I'm going to just hand it over to you,
I
sir.
think this is one of the most important podcasts we've ever done. And I'm so happy that we have Mrs. Beth Block here. I want to talk about something that is probably not the most pleasant thing to talk about. And it's essentially this: we all work with kids. And since we work with kids, there is a unique risk to working with children. And there's a thing that we need to do as leaders in the martial art industry is that we have to keep the children safe. And because we work with kids, we're going to naturally attract people that like to do harm with kids. And it's not a pleasant idea. And it's one of these things we have to have the right policies and the procedures in doing that. And it's not just for the martial art industry, it's for anything. Like USA Gymnastics had a huge issue with underage kids, USA Swimming, soccer, the Catholic Church. To be blind to the fact that us as martial arts school owners, that we are blind or ignorant about the possibility of this possibly happening in our own organizations is asinine. It's important that we have the right policies and procedures for our students and keeping them safe. So without, I know it just hit hard a little bit in the beginning and everybody's delete, I'm done listening. But, what are some things that martial arts schools should have, Mrs. Block, for something that should keep the kids safe and policies within their schools?
There is a whole host of answers to that question, but the most important thing is recognizing your staff, your volunteers need to be kept walled off from your students under the age of 18 when they're not inside the studio. That means you need policies and procedures in place that make it completely clear there are no relationships of any sort outside the dojang with a student. Ideally, with any student, but absolutely any student under the age of 18.
And
That's a great point, Mrs. Block, and I'm sure Master Chanli could attest to this. Is making sure not just your staff, but your leadership team, all of that, they have no social media connections, invite of these kids to their own personal account. Make sure
That
that is that correct, Mrs. Block?
That is absolutely correct. Your leadership team becomes an issue because frequently those teenagers have relationships with teen students inside school. And so you need to develop policies that address that as well, because inside your studio, the leadership team has a position of authority that you cannot afford to have carry over into their relationship in school.
That put that's another strong point. We forget this as business owners. They do have position of authority, position of power, because these students look up to these black belts and leaders, and we empower them. And I'm not just talking about your head instructor. I'm talking about how you're training your leadership team from teenagers on, even to adults. They're part of the leadership team, and we forget that the rest of the school, we empower the leadership team as the master instructor, and we forget that the rest of school sees them as an authority figure as well. And that's one of the part that the point that you're making. Absolutely, Mrs. Block.
So making sure having a policy, the communication policy, I think is very important. That they're not allowed to contact students from their devices to talk to them or have a social communications with them. And it's one of these things you've got to be stern on, because the only reason they met that student is through your organization. So you have to be in control of that and controlling of all that data, that they're not allowed to like give out phone numbers to other people or connect with them. They can connect to them through if you have a group meet among the staff, that's one of the channels that we use if they want to talk amongst the staff. But having, a 19-year-old staff member contact a 15-year-old staff member via a personal text is a huge no-no. It's one of those things that you should say that it's not allowed to do. It's one of these things that you want to make sure that they are understanding that as one of the cardinal sins of within your organization. That's something that shouldn't happen.
It needs to be grounds for immediate termination. You need to have policies and procedures that your entire staff knows. If they cross one of these lines, they are immediately terminated. And this needs to be one of those
Right.
lines.
Mrs. Block, so I don't know if you're aware, a lot of the school owners, they create a leadership team to groom or train potential potential staff members as they get rise in ranks and learn more experience. Do they need to be informed in policies just like how you would train a staff member and do that right away, or do you wait until they become staff members? What is your take, Mrs.?
Right away, because again, you've put them in a position of authority. The rest of the students look up to them. They have that power position. They need to be trained immediately on the responsibilities that go along with that.
What are some of the examples that you feel that's going to be important that we lay out immediately and consistently thereafter?
So I'm not going to focus just on your leadership team. At this point, it applies to everyone. Leadership, whether they're a teenager or an adult, everyone needs to understand that they are a professional. They are somebody that the lower ranks are looking up to. And as a result, their relationship can be professionally friendly, but not friends. And that's a very important distinction. You want instructors that are going to have a good working relationship, that students are going to look up to. But it's not 1970 anymore. It's really not okay to go have dinner on the weekend with the family of one of your students. That just doesn't fly in America. Learning where those lines are, learning that if you have a picture of a child that is unrelated to you on your phone, you can end up going to prison for having done that. And so making sure people know their personal devices are not to be used for taking pictures, they're not to be used for communication. You're using solely the studio's communication channels and devices. People need to know that they are responsible for a standard of conduct outside the studio as well as inside, because your outside behavior impacts somebody's view of the studio. If you have on your social media personal feed open to everybody a picture where you're half dressed and half drunk, that impacts people's view of you. You need to be aware of appropriate touch, and you need to have specific policies and procedures on what's appropriate touch and what isn't appropriate
So if I
touch.
can,
If you leave me to, I'll keep,
yeah,
please, I'll
yeah,
just
I
keep
know. I
rambling.
just want to talk about like social media real quick, and what we've done in our own organization is that my instructors asked me, like, we can't friend our students. I'm like, no, you can't unless you have a separate instructor page, and it's only martial arts students, right? You shouldn't have another page for your personal page. And then that was a policy that we made within our own organization, is that you have a professional page and then you have a private page. And here's the law of unintended consequences. We have people that are on the left and we have people on the right. And especially with the last few elections, some of our senior instructors had really strong opinions one way or the other. And I said, if you guys blast that, you're going to lose 50% of your credibility to our students, and then you're going to be useless to us as an organization. So you need to make sure that you have a professional page, that you do not talk about your personal stuff. And it's important that when you're friending, you cannot friend anybody under the age of 18. Or if they friend you, you can't do that under the age of 18. But I highly discourage that they don't engage, right? And that you don't do that. And it's an important part of them developing that, because you're going to lose credibility. And in terms of the friend, this is the biggest. I know this is the biggest issue in every martial arts school. Be friendly, but don't be a friend. And we want you to be friendly to your students, having them over at your house or you coming and going to their house. And I know in your mind, you're like, I can do that. Let's take that one step further. Are you comfortable with your instructors going to your student's house? If that answer is no, then you shouldn't be doing it either. And it shouldn't happen because of the fact that, you know, you being the owner of the school or them being agents of the school, they represent your academy. And if something happens, that puts you in liability.
Even if you're comfortable with them going, even if nothing ever happens, the door is open to accusations. And all it takes is an accusation to potentially take away everything you've worked for and wipe out all the good you've done in your community. Why would you open the door to an accusation?
Oh,
I'm going to
100%.
I'm going to back the truck up and talk about you telling your instructors they can have professional instructor pages. If they set those up themselves, you have no access that they don't give you. You don't know who they're private messaging with. You don't know what they're saying. I'm sorry, you've got to say no to private instructor pages. You need to have control. If you want a school sponsored page for every instructor, that's great, but you have the control over it.
Then it should just be, then
So,
bottom line, because I don't want to create more work, is you shouldn't friend your students. Right.
Period. Exactly.
so it's okay to have a public school page where all your staff and instructors are there and everybody can see as a public, but just making sure that there's no private communications even on a official school page is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Correct. And
That
yeah,
makes a lot
it
of
makes
sense.
perfect sense. I know of a incident that happened at a school where two teen instructors, I think one was like 15 and one was 17 and whatever, and male, female. And I believe the 17-year-old asked the 15-year-old, if you show me yours, I'll show you yours or mine, and sent a text of a naked picture of himself. And then the other staff member did not do it. Just thought it was funny that she could bait someone to do it. And then proceeded to show the other staff members that were also underage. And then that school ended up having an incident where there were other kids that now that was considered child pornography, that they were exposed
Yep.
to child porn. And it delved into this huge issue. And both kids could have gotten in incredible trouble because of the fact that, even though they were minors, they were distributing child porn. That was the law they were breaking. And so the school owner dealt with it, dealt with all the parents. It came to a peaceful resolution. The both kids were let go in the organization, and now they learned a valuable lesson. And so I know we say it's kids being kids and whatever, but you just don't know. And even though instructor had nothing to do with it, it became this like contentious issue. So once again, it goes back to training and policies and making sure that, hey, the only way you can communicate with one another is through your, Slack or GroupMe or whatever channel you created, and that they shouldn't be texting each other personally through other channels and things like that, because it just opens up another wall of liability as you're trying to mitigate kind of what is proper and what's improper. And I'm not saying that you have bad people. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you have to have policies to keep them safe, right? Because you may get one bad apple that ruins it for everybody. And so you just making sure that you keep that in place with going on. Another policy that I believe is super important is the rule of three.
Oh,
And you
huge.
should never have a instructor, and that's just not with minors. This is also with adults, that you're never talking to a student one on one, that you always have a third person in the room, because you just don't know what can be accused. I had a school owner that was accused of having a possible affair with a mom, and apparently the mom was having fantasies about the instructor, but there was no interaction. And the school has cameras. Everything was recorded. There was nothing that was inappropriate. And essentially, it was a person that was a little bit off kilter, and the husband was upset. It was just a hot mess. But because he had backed it up and followed the rule of three, and this, like I said, the school owner did nothing wrong. It was just the fact that you had someone that was emotionally off or disturbed, that started having fantasies about the instructor, and then the husband accused everybody of things like that. It's crazy. I'm sure you've heard a lot of crazy stories that have gone on. I can't even imagine some of the stories that you've heard over the years.
A lot of stories, and I'll share one or two with you in a minute. Want to talk about the rule of three, where I train. Adult class is always last. We finish at about 9 o'clock at night. And you have teenagers in the class that are too young to drive, but the parents aren't waiting. And after class, everybody chats a little bit and heads out the door. I will always linger because sometimes mom or dad is late getting there to pick up that teen that can't drive. And I will not ever leave my instructor alone in the studio with someone under the age of 18. I highly recommend that everyone put in place a practice or a procedure to make sure their instructors don't end up in that bad position. Whether it's finding an adult student that's there that you can ask to hang out like I do, whatever it is that's the solution for the individual studio, you need to have a plan and you need to practice that plan.
100%.
That's
I, I
I we I know from Master Chanley and myself, we've been in the industry so long, we've heard worst case scenarios not only once, but multiple times throughout the years. And that's from our network of people, not our friends, but who we known about or known of. And that's not including news that we've caught the wind of. I know I've said this many times, my 12-year-old boy is in soccer, and there was just an incident a few months ago in our local region that all the coaches know, who was accused of that, of the worst case scenario with a child. And it was such a big headline, but it's not just within the martial arts industry. This is every industry that involves youth sports, or not even sports, youth.
It's every industry I serve involves youth. And I've been working with industries that serve youth for 38 years now, holy moly. And over that course of 38 years, I have seen hundreds of broken bones and other physical injuries. Unfortunately, I've seen more than 100 cases of abuse and molestation.
That's a
It,
lot.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. My mission is to keep that number as low as I possibly can. And if anybody walks away from this podcast inspired to put new policies and procedures in place, maybe I've saved another child.
And once again, if you're working with kids, you're going to naturally attract individuals that want to do harm to children. And it is your job as an instructor and as a person that works with children in having the right policies and procedures that keeps the kids safe. And I can't stress to you enough that it's critical. The rule of three is one of the biggest things that you can do. I know one more terrible story, and just to give everybody an idea, I went through a training called Kid Safe, and I did it with the local police department, and I took our instructors to go. And the presenter was talking about how a teacher that she worked with was accused of something inappropriate with a 12-year-old, and it detectives were called. He was dismissed. All these things happened, and after a year and a half battle, his reputation was dragged through the mud. He got fired. He had to go to a different industry. He was a school teacher. And the kid, after a year and a half, finally cracked and said, yeah, I accused my teacher of inappropriate relations because of the fact that he wouldn't let me go on a field trip because I didn't hand in my homework. And
Yep.
so there's two sides of this coin I'm talking about is that we also got to protect you. You can't just be like, you know what? I'm a good guy. That can't happen to me. I have cameras in all my schools that record all the conversations in the cameras in the offices and everywhere. And so and we every year, every January, we go over our safety protocols and procedures with all our staff and what we ask of them. And it's super important that you do the same. After this podcast, if you guys want to send Master Jimmy Hong an email, I'll be happy to give you my safety policies and so forth. I'm with you, Mrs. Block. I want to keep our industry safe. I want to keep the instructors safe. And more importantly, I want to keep the kids safe. And like I said, we're not accusing you of anything. It's just the fact that you have to have policies for everybody that is within your organization in terms of making sure that nothing bad happens. So I want to talk about the next steps.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Before we go to the next step, Mrs. Block, do you have policies and documentations you could share with the school owners available?
Absolutely.
Wait,
Because
I
first
was
of
we would
going to
all,
love.
I'm
say,
offended that you even have to ask that because you're talking to the amazing Beth Block. She doesn't have what it's like a manual, man. It's like it's the playbook
I
that you should just keep your mouth shut when you like do these things. You know what I'm saying? It's just ridiculous. You even have to ask.
keep
no.
a. I should
Who do
keep
you
my
think
mouth
you're
shut on a
talking to? You're talking to
podcast.
the
I
amazing Beth
will.
Block.
We will. We will include your contact information on our show notes below or below our video and YouTube description box. So please, the audience and listeners, look for that below for Mrs. Block's contact information. Contact her for your insurance, and she will gladly forward you the policies that we're talking about right now. I'm sorry, Mrs. Block. Go ahead.
We'll forward them even if you don't talk to me about your insurance. I'll ask you about your insurance, but I'll forward the policies and procedures either way. Can I tell one more
Yes,
story
ma'am.
that I think is really important? And thank you so much for talking about the teacher whose life was ruined because there was a kid that was upset, and that happens all the time. I also have to say, 3 years ago, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I got shocked down to my toenails, which is hard to do with everything I've seen over the years. It was a case in a martial arts studio that there truly was an adult molesting a child, a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old. It was the first time I ever saw a female be the molester. And I think that I know there was for me, I think there is at large the belief that it's only the males that you have to worry about being the molesters. For decades, that was true. It is not now.
I see news all the time now about these teachers in middle school and high school that are female teachers molesting underage boys. So, to your testament, I don't know if we were just ignorant back then, but or it's always happened or it's happening more frequently now. But I've noticed in the news cycle that's pretty prevalent as well. And that's something that we need to really consider.
It has ramped up a lot over the last decade.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. I think it's not just, it could be male, female.
Female,
Yeah,
male.
it could be any of that. At the end of the day, I think a hint of paranoia in the world of safety is completely okay. All right? And I think that's okay. To be ignorant and unaware and having this idea that it couldn't happen to me is reckless. It really is. And I just, like I said, I know this is not a very pleasant podcast to be a part of, but I think it's an important message that all people need to understand, because we have to have the proper policies and procedures to make sure that we follow. And like I said, if it can happen to the Boy Scouts of America and USA Gymnastics, right, then it can happen at our schools. So we've got to make sure we do that. So I want to ask you to the next question is, what does most policies in the martial art industry, they have coverage for the victims and they have coverage to also keep the school safe? Or how does that work? Can you just give us a rough kind of idea of what that is like?
Absolutely. There is a variety of coverage offered. And it- so I'm going to start with in my work with about 575 martial arts studios across America. And of that group, half of them do not have any abuse coverage because they don't want to pay for it. So, just in my little subset, half of the studios are uninsured, period, which means as soon as an accusation is made, they're on their own. Of the half that have coverage, depending on the company they're with, is how much coverage they have. Some companies, some insurance companies include the legal defense in the limit. It's included in the 100,000 limit. I have a client right now who spent years being defended, $250,000 in defense. That would have been exhausted and they would have been on their own. There's a company I represent that offers $1 million limits, and the defense is part of that $1 million. But at that, even with $250,000 in defense, there would have been 750 left to pay a judgment if there had been a judgment. If something had really happened, the insurance company would be inking the check from the get-go. The company that offers the $1 million is the most expensive company out there for everything, including abuse. The third company I represent offers 100 grand of coverage, but unlimited defense. In my opinion, the defense is the most vital part of an abuse coverage, because if you're putting all these policies and procedures in place, if people have adequate training and they can prove all of that, they do the background checks and have those in file, then they aren't negligent. What they really need is the defense. So it's a all over the place in the industry on what the coverage is. And there's a whole lot of people in the martial arts industry that believe all insurance coverage is the same, whether we're talking about abuse or anything else. And the bottom line is, it's not all the same. If you don't take the time and don't have somebody educate you on the differences, you find out when it's too late, when something's happened.
That's fascinating that your recommendation is making sure that your policy is it covers your defense costs because those lawyer fees, I mean, that's and these things could go for years. Well, I know a school owner who's been doing it since who's been defending his name since before start of COVID. That's 5 years ago. And it's so the talking with them, the defense cost is so big that I don't know how he did it. I still don't know how he did it, but that's fascinating that your recommendation is the defense cost over the insurance cost.
Right.
Yes,
This
sir.
is when the stuff hits the fan, then you start looking at it. But you got to be proactive. My house got flooded 9 years ago, and I went, oh yeah, I'm sure we have flood insurance, whatever. And the adjuster calls me and goes, where did the water come from? I'm like, what, did it come through the window, in the basement window, or whatever? I said, no, it came through our sump pump failed. And he goes, oh, you don't have sump pump insurance. I go, no, it still got flooded. No, but the water came through, so you have sump pump failure. What, you didn't really get flooded. And I was like, what? That was like a $30,000 issue. I had to pay $30,000 to redo my basement. And I just sat there. If I just would have paid an extra like $75 a month, this would have all been covered or whatever, or get a battery operated backup, whatever. But that's a terrible example, but it's one of those things you got to look at your stuff. And two things here: preventative, have the right policies and procedures, keep the kids safe, keep your instructors safe, keep you safe, keep your assets safe, keep your students safe, keep all the children safe. That's like the biggest thing. And the second thing is review your coverage and so forth. Mrs. Block, I just want to thank you for coming on this podcast. If you don't mind coming on again and maybe talking about some training that every school owner should do that you were talking about before, would you be willing to do that, ma'am?
I would love to, and I'll have a set of headphones
I
next
know.
time.
Oh, but also even before that, you're going to be joining us at the ASA Summit this next month in October 3rd and 4th. We and everybody, audience, everybody, please go to Mrs. Block, discuss this if you have more questions on this or any other questions regarding protecting your business and school. Let's call it a day there. I know that was a heavy subject, but we just felt it was so important to discuss. A big thank you to Mrs. Beth Block from Block Insurance for stepping onto the mat with us today. Remember, in martial arts, we train to protect ourselves, but school owners need to protect their students, families, themselves, and their reputation too. This is Black Belt Banter signing off, and we look forward to talking with you next time. Thank you, Mrs. Block. Master Chanley, a big thank you as well. We'll see everybody next time.